He fired the black janitor before Christmas, December 23rd. A janitor's locker sits untouched in the basement of a billion-dollar building. Inside, a CEO stands alone in the darkness, holding something in his hands. His shoulders shake. He's crying. What he discovered about the man he fired just 10 days earlier would haunt him forever. And when you hear what was in that letter, you'll understand why some mistakes can never be undone. Quick question before we dive in. Where in the world are you watching this from, and what time is it for you right now? Drop your city and time in the comments. And hey, if this story resonates with you as it did with me, please hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss stories that truly matter. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. Now let's begin. The man's name was Fletcher Rhodes. 61 years old, CEO of Rhodes Capital Group, a real estate investment firm managing over $3 billion in assets across the Northeast. Fletcher had built his empire from scratch, climbing through sheer determination and calculated decisions. He was known in Boston's financial district as brilliant, disciplined, and cold. People respected him. They also feared him. His leadership style was simple: perform or leave. No second chances, no emotional attachments. Business was business. That philosophy had made him wealthy beyond measure, but had cost him everything else. His wife had left him 8 years ago. His 2 daughters rarely called. Fletcher told himself he didn't mind. Success required sacrifice. But on this particular December evening, sitting in the quiet darkness of a janitor's locker room, Fletcher Rhodes was learning that some sacrifices exact a price far greater than anything he'd imagined. He'd used his master key to open locker number 43, the one assigned to Trevor Henderson, the janitor he'd fired 10 days ago, the janitor who, according to the security guard, hadn't been seen or heard from since. Inside the locker, Fletcher found a winter coat, thin and worn, a pair of work gloves with holes in the fingertips, a small photo taped to the inside of the door showing a young boy, maybe 10 years old, in a hospital bed, smiling despite the tubes and wires. And an envelope, plain white unsealed, with 3 words written on the front in careful handwriting: "To my boss." Fletcher's hands trembled as he opened it. But wait, let me back up. Because to understand why this letter shattered Fletcher Rhodes completely, you need to know how we got here. You need to know about the firing, about the investigation that followed, and about the truth that Fletcher was only now beginning to piece together. Fletcher Rhodes was not a bad man. At least that's what he would have told you 6 months ago. He was demanding, yes. Impatient with incompetence, absolutely. But everything he did for the company. He arrived at the office every morning at 6:30. He left after everyone else. He worked weekends, holidays. His dedication was total. Rhodes Capital Group had posted record profits for 7 consecutive years. Fletcher's investment strategies were studied in business schools. He was brilliant at his job, just not particularly human. His office on the 42nd floor overlooked Boston Harbor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, everything designed for efficiency. No personal items, no family photos. What Fletcher couldn't tell you was the name of the woman who cleaned his office every night, or the man who vacuumed the conference room. They were invisible to him, part of the infrastructure, like the elevators. Trevor Henderson was one of those invisible people. 54 years old, he'd been working as a night custodian at Rhodes Capital Group for 2 years. He arrived at 10 p.m. and left at 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. He worked quietly, never drawing attention to himself. He did his job well enough that no one really noticed him, which in Fletcher's world meant he was doing it correctly. But here's what Fletcher didn't know about Trevor Henderson. Trevor had immigrated to the United States 17 years ago from Taiwan with his wife, Lynn, and their infant son, Michael. Trevor had been an engineer in Taiwan, but his credentials didn't transfer easily. His English wasn't fluent enough for professional work. He took jobs where he could find them. Eventually, custodial services. It wasn't what he'd trained for, but it kept his family fed and housed. Then 8 years ago, Michael was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The treatments began immediately. The medical bills piled up despite insurance. Trevor worked extra shifts. Lynn took a second job. They depleted their savings, took out loans. Still, it wasn't enough. By the time Michael turned 15, the family was drowning in debt that exceeded $400,000. But Michael was alive. Fragile, requiring ongoing care, but alive. And for Trevor, that was all that mattered. His son's life. Everything else was just details. Trevor never talked about any of this at work. Never mentioned his son's illness. Never asked for help. He showed up on time, did his job, and went home to spend whatever hours he could with Michael. He kept his struggles private. Didn't want to burden anyone. He just wanted to work and take care of his family. The trouble started in early December, during the company's year-end budget review. Fletcher and his finance team were going through every department, looking for areas to cut costs. One line item that caught his attention was the custodial services budget. The contract was up for renewal, and the company was proposing a 12% increase. Fletcher looked at the numbers and didn't like what he saw. He called a meeting with Marcus Webb, the facilities manager. "Walk me through this increase," Fletcher said. 12% seems excessive." Marcus explained that labor costs were rising. The cleaning company was having trouble retaining staff. They'd had to raise wages to remain competitive. Fletcher wasn't convinced. "What about performance? Are we getting our money's worth?" Marcus hesitated. "There have been a few minor issues, nothing major. Some complaints about trash not being emptied consistently, but overall service has been acceptable." "Acceptable isn't good enough," Fletcher said. "Not for a 12% premium. Document every service failure for the next 2 weeks. We're going to use that to renegotiate." Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus documented every issue he could find. A conference room that wasn't vacuumed one Thursday. A trash can that was still full Friday morning. Break room with coffee rings on the counter. Some issues were legitimate. Others were nitpicking, but Fletcher wanted ammunition for his negotiation. The person whose work showed up most frequently was Trevor Henderson. Not because he was doing worse than anyone else, but because he was assigned to the executive floors, where people were most likely to notice minor issues. Here's where it gets crazy. Marcus presented his findings to Fletcher on December 12th. 17 documented service failures over 2 weeks, 8 attributed to the custodian responsible for executive floors. Fletcher looked at the data and made a decision. "Fire him," he said. Marcus blinked. "Sir, the custodian responsible for these failures, fire him. Contact the facilities company and terminate his assignment immediately." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Rhodes, it's December. Christmas is less than 2 weeks away. Could we issue a warning first?" Fletcher's expression didn't change. "This is a performance issue. If he can't do the job, he shouldn't be here. We're not a charity." "Make the call." The firing happened quickly. Trevor was called into the facilities company office on December 12th and told his services were no longer needed. They gave him his final paycheck. No severance, no warning. "Just we're letting you go." Trevor sat there processing. "Can I ask why?" The supervisor looked uncomfortable. "The client wasn't satisfied with your performance. Multiple complaints." "What complaints?" "I've been doing this job for 2 years. No one ever said anything." "The decision has been made. I'm sorry, Trevor." He wanted to argue to defend himself, but he could see it wouldn't matter. So he nodded, stood up, handed over his keys and access card, and left, just like that. 2 years of work ended in 5 minutes. When Trevor arrived home, his wife Lynn was making dinner. Michael was at the kitchen table doing homework, wearing a knit cap to cover his hair loss from chemotherapy. "You're home early," Lynn said. Trevor looked at his wife, at his son, and felt something inside him crack. "I got let go. They fired me today." Lynn's hand went to her mouth. Michael looked up, confused. "Dad, what happened?" "It's okay," Trevor said, though his voice betrayed him. "I'll find something else." But he didn't believe that. Not at 54 with limited English. Not 2 weeks before Christmas. Not with a sick child and mountains of debt. If this part makes sense, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's really watching this far. The first few days after Trevor's firing, nothing seemed unusual at Rhodes Capital Group. The facilities company sent a replacement custodian. Fletcher noticed the change only because he saw an unfamiliar face one evening. He didn't think anything of it. Marcus felt a twinge of guilt but pushed it aside. He'd just been following orders. Life continued as normal. The company closed 2 new investment deals. Fletcher attended a holiday party, drinking expensive wine and feeling satisfied with his achievements. Meanwhile, in his small apartment, Trevor was falling apart. He applied for unemployment, but was told he wasn't eligible because he'd been fired for cause. He reached out to every cleaning company, every staffing agency he could find. But when they asked why he'd left his last position, and he had to explain he'd been fired, the conversations ended quickly. No one wanted to hire someone with a termination on their record, especially during the holidays. Their rent was due January 1st. They had $400 in their bank account. Michael's next medication refill would cost $800. On December 17th, 5 days after the firing, Michael had a follow-up appointment with his oncologist. The news was cautiously optimistic. The treatment was working, but he'd need to continue chemotherapy for at least another 6 months. The doctor asked about their insurance status. Trevor admitted he'd recently lost his job and wasn't sure what their coverage would be in 30 days. The doctor pulled Trevor aside. "I need to be honest. Michael's treatment costs approximately $12,000 per month without insurance. If you lose coverage, you'll need to apply for financial assistance programs, but those take time. You need to get new insurance as quickly as possible." $12,000 a month. Trevor felt like he'd been punched. That evening, Trevor did something he'd never done before. He wrote a letter to his boss, the man who'd ordered his firing, Fletcher Rhodes. Trevor didn't expect it to change anything, but he needed to write down what he was feeling. He sat at the kitchen table with pen and paper. He wrote slowly, carefully. The letter wasn't angry. It was just honest. Honest about his life, his son, his situation. Honest about how much the job had meant to him because it kept his family afloat. He thanked Fletcher for the opportunity to work at Rhodes Capital, even though Fletcher had never personally hired him and probably didn't know he existed. He explained about Michael, about the medical bills, about the impossible choices facing them now. And he ended with a simple request. If Fletcher ever met Michael, please tell his son that his father had worked hard, that he'd tried his best, that he'd been proud to serve. Trevor folded the letter and put it in an envelope. He wrote "to my boss" on the front. Then he went to the building late one night, used the employee entrance that still recognized his access card, and left the letter in his locker. He didn't know why. Maybe he thought someone would find it. Maybe he just needed to feel like his story was heard. Back at Rhodes Capital, Fletcher was preparing for the company's final board meeting of the year, scheduled for December 20th. The meeting went well. The board praised Fletcher's leadership. Everything was on track. Everything was under control. But here's what Fletcher didn't see, what no one saw. On December 18th, 6 days after losing his job, Trevor Henderson suffered a massive heart attack. He was at home helping Michael with homework when the pain started. Sharp, crushing, radiating down his left arm. He tried to stand but collapsed on the kitchen floor. Lynn called 911. The ambulance arrived within minutes. But by the time they got Trevor to the hospital, it was too late. Massive myocardial infarction. He was pronounced dead at 8:47 p.m. The medical examiner's report noted that Trevor had been suffering from severe, untreated hypertension and coronary artery disease, likely exacerbated by chronic stress. He'd had warning signs, chest pains, shortness of breath. But he'd never sought medical care because he couldn't afford to take time off work. He'd ignored the symptoms and kept pushing forward because his family needed him, until his body simply couldn't push anymore. Lynn was devastated. Michael was shattered, and no one at Rhodes Capital Group had any idea that the janitor they'd fired a week ago was dead. Not yet. 3 days passed before anyone learned what had happened. December 21st, the Friday before Christmas. Gary Henderson, head of building security, was doing evening rounds when he encountered Lynn Henderson in the lobby. She was standing by the reception desk, looking lost. She held a cardboard box. "Can I help you?" Gary asked. Lynn looked up with red, exhausted eyes. "I'm looking for someone who knew my husband. He worked here, Trevor Henderson, the custodian. He died 3 days ago, and I'm trying to understand why he was fired." Gary felt a chill. "I'm so sorry for your loss, ma'am." Lynn's hands trembled on the box. "He had a heart attack. The doctors say it was from stress, 6 days after he lost his job here, and I don't understand. He worked hard." "Why was he fired?" Gary didn't have answers. "Let me see if I can find out some information for you. Would you like to sit down?" Lynn shook her head. "I can't stay. I have to get back to my son. He's very sick. Cancer. He needs me." "I just wanted to know." She handed Gary the box. "These are Trevor's things from his locker. I thought maybe someone here would want them." Gary took the box. "I'll make sure the right people see this." After Lynn left, Gary sat in the security office, staring at the box. He opened it slowly. Inside was the winter coat, the gloves, the thermos, the photo, and the letter. Gary read the letter twice. By the time he finished, his hands were shaking. He'd seen a lot in 20 years of corporate security. But this was different. This was a man pouring out his heart, explaining his life, asking only that someone remember he'd existed. And that man was now dead. Gary called Marcus Webb, the facility's manager. Left a voicemail explaining the situation. Marcus got the message an hour later and drove back to the office immediately. Gary met him in the lobby and handed over the box. "You need to see this. The janitor you fired last week. He died, heart attack. His widow came by tonight." Marcus opened the letter and read it standing in the lobby. Gary watched his face go pale. "Oh my God, this is real. His widow just left, it's real." Marcus read it again. "Does Rhodes know?" "No, you're the first person I've called." Marcus closed his eyes. "This is going to destroy him." "Maybe it should," Gary said quietly. Marcus took the box and walked to the elevator. He rode up to the 42nd floor. Fletcher's office lights were still on. Marcus knocked. "Come in," Fletcher's voice called. Marcus entered to find Fletcher at his desk. "Marcus, what are you doing here? We need to talk." "It's important." Marcus placed the box on Fletcher's desk. Then he handed him the letter. "The janitor we fired, Trevor Henderson, he died 3 days ago, heart attack. His widow brought this by tonight." Fletcher took the letter, confused. "What, who died?" "The janitor, the one you told me to fire 2 weeks ago. He's dead, and before he died he wrote this letter, to you." Fletcher unfolded the paper and began to read. The office was silent. Marcus watched Fletcher's face as he read, watched the confusion shift to disbelief, then to horror. Fletcher read the entire letter without stopping. Then he read it again. The letter explained everything: Trevor's background, his son's illness, the medical debt, the desperate financial situation, the fear of losing insurance, the impossibility of finding new work, and woven through it all was gratitude. "Thank you for letting me work here. I'm sorry I wasn't good enough. I hope my son will be proud of what I tried to do." Fletcher set the letter down carefully on his desk. His hands were shaking. "He had a child with cancer," he said quietly. "Yes," Marcus said, "a 15-year-old son. Still in treatment. The widow said they're drowning in medical debt, and now she's lost her husband too." Fletcher looked up. Did anyone tell me he had a sick child?" Marcus hesitated. "I didn't know." "I don't think anyone knew. He never mentioned it." "But we didn't ask," Fletcher said. His voice was hollow. "We didn't know his name. We just looked at a spreadsheet and decided he was expendable." Fletcher stood and walked to the windows. Outside, the city was bright with Christmas lights. "He thanked me," Fletcher said. "In this letter, he thanked me for the opportunity, after we fired him, after we took away everything. He thanked me. I don't think he knew it was you who ordered the firing," Marcus said quietly. "He just thought it was his fault." Fletcher turned around. "Where is his widow now?" "She left. She has to take care of their son." "Does she need anything? Money, support?" "I don't know. Gary has her contact information." Fletcher nodded. "Find her, tell her we want to help." But even as he said it, Fletcher knew the words were inadequate. The man was dead. His family was destroyed. And it had happened because Fletcher had looked at a budget spreadsheet and decided 12% was too much to pay. He'd fired a man whose name he didn't know for performance issues that barely mattered, never once asking why or if there were circumstances worth understanding. He'd treated a human being like a line item. And now that the human being was gone, Fletcher picked up the letter again, read it a third time, a fourth. The words blurred. His chest felt tight. "Leave me alone," he said to Marcus. His voice cracked. "Please." Marcus nodded and left quietly, leaving the letter on Fletcher's desk. The door closed. Fletcher stood in his office, surrounded by luxury and success, holding a letter from a dead janitor who'd thanked him for destroying his life. And for the first time in years, Fletcher Rhodes broke down and cried. Fletcher didn't go home that night. He sat in his office until dawn, staring at the letter, trying to process what he'd done. Not intentionally, not maliciously. But he'd done it nonetheless. At some point during those dark hours, Fletcher pulled up his computer and started researching. Trevor Henderson. He found an obituary that Lynn must have posted. Trevor Henderson, beloved husband and father, passed away unexpectedly on December 18th. He is survived by his wife Lynn and son Michael. Services will be private. Fletcher read it over and over. Beloved husband and father. That's how Trevor was remembered, not as a janitor, as a husband, a father, a person with a family who loved him. Fletcher searched further and found a fundraising page Lynn had set up months ago, trying to raise money for Michael's medical expenses. The goal was $50,000. They'd raised $8,000. People offering $5 here, $10 there, people who didn't have much but wanted to help. Fletcher looked at his own bank account and felt sick. He clicked the donation button and entered $100,000. Anonymous. It wouldn't bring Trevor back, but maybe it would keep Lynn and Michael from losing their home. Maybe it would pay for Michael's treatments. On December 22nd, Fletcher did something he'd never done. He canceled his plans to fly to Aspen for Christmas. Instead, he called his daughter Emily. They hadn't spoken in 3 months. "Hi, Dad," she said cautiously. "Is everything okay?" "No," Fletcher said. "Everything is not okay. Emily, when did I become the kind of person who doesn't see other people? When did I stop caring?" There was a long silence. "Dad, what's going on?" he told her. About Trevor, about the firing, about the letter, about realizing too late that his pursuit of perfection and profit had blinded him to everything that actually mattered. "I'm sorry that happened," Emily finally said. "But Dad, honestly." "I'm not surprised. You've been like this for as long as I can remember. Mom tried to tell you for years. You never listened." "I know," Fletcher said, "and I can't fix that, but I'm asking you to tell me how." "How do I change?" "You start by actually showing up for people, for family, not just when it's convenient. You show up consistently. You put other people first." Fletcher nodded. "Will you give me a chance to try?" "Maybe," Emily said, "but it has to be real, Dad." Fletcher found Lynn's contact information and called her on December 23rd. She answered warily. "Mrs. Henderson, this is Fletcher Rhodes. I'm the CEO of Rhodes Capital, the company where your husband worked. I received your letter and I need to speak with you. May I come see you, please? I know I have no right to ask, but I need to apologize in person." Lynn was silent. "Why, it won't bring Trevor back." "No," Fletcher agreed. "It won't, but I need you to know that what happened was my fault, and I want to help if you'll let me." "Help how? With money?" "Money doesn't fix anything," Fletcher said. "But it might help you keep your home and pay for Michael's treatment. It might ease some of the burden Trevor was carrying. I can't change what happened, Mrs. Henderson, but I can make sure you and your son don't suffer more than you already have." There was a long pause. "You can come tomorrow, 2 o'clock, but don't expect me to forgive you." "I don't," Fletcher said. "I don't expect anything." The next afternoon, December 24th, Christmas Eve, Fletcher drove to the address Lynn had given him. Small apartment building in a neighborhood he'd never been to, streets that looked forgotten by the city's prosperity. He found the apartment and knocked. Lynn answered, her face tired and guarded. Behind her, he could see a small living room. And sitting on the couch, wrapped in blankets, was a teenage boy with no hair and hollow cheeks. "Michael, come in," Lynn said stiffly. Fletcher entered and stood awkwardly. Michael looked at him with curiosity but didn't speak. "Mrs. Henderson," Fletcher began. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for what happened to your husband. I'm sorry for firing him without understanding his situation. I'm sorry for being so blind that I never even learned his name." Lynn's eyes filled with tears. "Do you know what he said the day he lost his job? He said, 'It's okay, I'll find something else.' He was lying. He knew it wasn't going to be okay. But he didn't want me to worry. He died trying to protect us. And you took away his ability to do that." The words hit Fletcher like punches. "I know, and I can't change it, but I've set up a trust fund for Michael's medical care. Whatever he needs, for as long as he needs it, it's covered. Your rent, your bills, your living expenses, all covered." Fletcher turned to Michael. "Your father was a hero, not because of what he did for a living, but because he sacrificed everything to take care of you. He worked jobs that were hard because he loved you, and when things got unbearable, he never stopped trying. That's who your father was, and you should be proud of him." Michael's eyes welled with tears. "I am proud of him." "He was the best dad," Fletcher nodded. "I believe that, and I'm going to make sure that the work he did, the sacrifices he made, weren't for nothing. You're going to get through this treatment. You're going to go to college. You're going to have the future your father wanted for you, I promise you that." Lynn wiped her eyes. "Why are you doing this? Is it guilt?" "Yes," Fletcher admitted. "It's guilt, but it's also because it's right. Because I finally understand that success doesn't mean anything if you destroy people to achieve it. Your husband taught me that. Too late for him, but not too late to change how I live going forward." He stayed for an hour. They talked about Trevor, about the kind of man he was, the stories he told Michael, his dreams for his son's future. Fletcher listened more than he spoke, learning about the person he'd never bothered to know. When he left, Lynn walked him to the door. "This doesn't make things okay," she said. "I know," Fletcher replied, "but maybe it's a start." Over the following months, Fletcher made good on his promises. He established a foundation in Trevor Henderson's name, focused on supporting families dealing with childhood cancer and catastrophic medical debt. He changed policies at Rhodes Capital Group, implementing programs to ensure employees at all levels were seen, heard, and supported. He mandated that every manager learn the names and circumstances of everyone in their department, regardless of position. He visited Lynn and Michael regularly, attended medical appointments when Lynn needed support. Michael's treatment was successful. 2 years later, he was declared cancer-free. 4 years after Trevor's death, Michael graduated from high school with honors. Fletcher attended the ceremony. Afterward, Michael approached him. "Mr. Rhodes, I wanted to thank you for everything you've done. My dad would be grateful." Fletcher shook his head. "Your dad saved my life, Michael. I was a hollow shell pretending to be successful. He showed me what real strength looks like." "What does real sacrifice mean? I'm the grateful one." "So where are you in this story? Are you a Fletcher moving through life so focused on your goals that you forget to see the people around you? Or are you a Trevor carrying burdens no one knows about, suffering in silence? Think about the custodians in your building, the servers at your restaurant, the cashiers at your grocery store. Do you know their names? Do you see them as full human beings or as background characters? Trevor Henderson's death was preventable. The stress that killed him, the desperation that destroyed his heart, came from being treated as disposable. From a boss who never bothered to learn his name. How many Trevors are there in the world right now? How many people are one crisis away from collapse, invisible to the people who control their livelihoods? Fletcher Rhodes learned his lesson the hardest way possible. Don't wait for a tragedy to teach you empathy. Don't wait for a letter from someone you destroyed to make you realize they were human. Look around you right now. See the people in your life. Learn their names. Ask how they're doing. Treat them like they matter. Because they do, every single one of them matters. Trevor Henderson mattered. His life had value. His work had dignity. His death should never have happened. But his story can still change things. It can change you, if you let it. So before you go on with your day, think about this. If you died tomorrow, what would people say about you? Would they remember you as someone who saw them, valued them, cared about them? Or would they remember you as someone who looked past them, who treated them as expendable, who never bothered to learn their name? You have a choice. Every day you have a choice, to see or to be blind, to care or to ignore, to build up or to tear down. What will you choose? If this story affected you, share it. Not for views or likes, but because maybe someone needs to hear it. Maybe someone needs to be reminded that people matter. That compassion matters. How we treat each other, especially those with less power, defines who we really are. Rest in peace, Trevor Henderson. Your letter changed more than you could ever know.